Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy, the Insane Game Freak. This is a little bit of a different kind of video, but the Black Clover movie has come out. Black Clover and the Sword of the Wizard King, and I've watched it. But this is not a review. This is more talking about the four Wizard King enemies that are in the film, primarily because after watching the film, this isn't really a spoiler. They don't really show a lot of their backstory and history. You get a little bit of like flashes of scenes that don't make sense because they don't really go into full context of what was going on in their past. Conrad probably getting the most developed of the four of them, and I think what Jester doesn't get any like flash of a scene, so we don't know. So I figured I would make this video that essentially would serve the purpose of explaining the history of each of these four Wizard Kings and what led to their demise. Now, it's not anything crazy in detail, but it's enough to give you a general idea of how they lived their lives and what happened to them. Now, because Conrad's has the most stuff in the movie, I'll save him for last and put, hey, if you don't want to watch it, you don't have to watch it. Now I'm going to go through each of their stories and while also giving you history. Also, shout out to Night Baron on Twitter. Essentially, volume 23.5 is essentially about the movie because that's where it would take place. It takes place it's like right when the time skip begins, but before like the Spade Kingdom arc kicks off. So it'd be like episode 157 to 158. It's in between those two episodes in the anime. And that volume essentially explains their backstory. There's even a chapter that takes place after the events of the movie that I haven't read yet, and I may cover in another video depending on how people feel about this one. But with all that being said, let's get into it and let's start. Jester's backstory, essentially he was born into a noble family and didn't really grow up with any hardships or rough times, no real tragedies in his general childhood, and became a part of the Magic Knights. He made two friends, Tenor and Raid. Tenor being from a remote village near the Diamond Kingdom, but not in the Diamond Kingdom, and Raid being from the Common Realm. Now, Jester didn't have what I consider a lot of friends, but those two were his like closest friends. While continuing his grind through the Magic Knights, he finds out that Tenor's village is being raided by bandits. But the Magic Knights are like, well, we don't really cover remote villages by our neighboring nation. So Jester eventually just says, screw it, and I'm going myself to save my friend. And so he goes to the village to protect it and to save Tenor. Unfortunately, Tenor ends up still dying, which deeply affected Jester. But he still had Raid, and he decided to push forward with his dreams of becoming a Magic Knight captain, which he achieves. Turns out, though, Tenor's village is raided again later. This time, he makes it in time, only to realize that unlike last time, this time was a trap set by his other friend Raid, who's been working for the enemy. Through this whole scuffle, he loses Raid. So his two closest friends, one dies and one betrays him. And he does not take this well. Ironically enough, you may not know this, but Jester gets the name of Mad King. This primarily comes from what happens after he realizes he's been betrayed and someone tries to assassinate him. He essentially comes up with this new plan because he eventually becomes Wizard King, and the plan is the conquest of the four kingdoms. But essentially, they don't explain the plan in the volume, but the idea is pretty straightforward. It sounds like he just wants to take over all four kingdoms so that this doesn't happen again. This is where he gains the title of Mad King, but he is slowly but surely gaining the respect and understanding of the people around him. Unfortunately, there's some royals who really don't like what he's doing, and it ends up costing him his life to where he never fully achieves his dream. Jester, ironically enough, has the least, I would say, is the least tragic in the sense of it being royal influence, but it's still sad that he lost both his friends. Low-key went crazy and had a plan to essentially control all four kingdoms, but I guess was not so far gone as we thought he was, but it didn't matter because the royals didn't like him and put an end to that completely. So that is Jester's backstory. So Edward was just a normal man living, and he just liked to go to churches and listen to the sermons of priests. And then eventually decided to become a priest himself and decided to take care of kids in an orphanage, which he had in his own separate village. Tragedy strikes and bandits come and raid the village. also from the Diamond Kingdom. Through this raid, it leads to the death of all the kids in the orphanage, and this is the first time Edward decides to use his magic pretty much in full anger and protection of this ever happening again. This is actually the event that leads to him becoming a part of the Magic Knights. And he also slowly but surely gains the respect and love of the people, and his power grows, and eventually he earns the title of Wizard King. Great. Cool. But the nobles don't like him either. And the reason why the nobles don't like him is because he's the one who was slowly breaking down the walls between someone who's a noble and royal versus someone who's a commoner versus someone who's in the Forsaken realm. And so, through their evil plotting, get him stripped of his title as Wizard King. And when he realizes that the nobles and royals plotted to essentially get his title stripped, he becomes a very vengeful man. He actually loses faith in God and proceeds to spend the rest of his life trying to tear down all the nobles and royals and individuals in power who stripped him of his title and removed his chances from improving and changing the world. Although this doesn't last long because he is very quickly captured and executed. Needless to say, Edward, I think, is the most, isn't the most tragic, but essentially is a man who was robbed of everything and never really recovered. He just kept taking loss after loss. He became angry and vengeful, and unlike Wizard King, and died pitifully, probably cursing the names of his enemies while doing so, which is funny because he's like the most mild-mannered. He's surprisingly mild-mannered when you see him in the movie. And actually maintains being mild-mannered in the movie. And then we come to Princia. Princia to me is probably the saddest of the three. Because Princia, you'll get into it, but Princia, although is the reason why the war with the Diamond King ended, she got overtly screwed. So Princia also was grown up a noble and a royal and had a pretty fine family and home life. But some nobles were smart and tricky enough to pretty much trick her family out of their home and kingdom. And through a bunch of strong arming, essentially got Princia to enlist into the Magic Knights. She actually joined the Blue Rose Squad and became very powerful and well known, while still being under the thumb of these nobles and royals who took over her kingdom. But this eventually led her into the position of Wizard King, although it was somewhat forced through the nobles and royals who took over her kingdom. But it led to her fighting in the war against the Diamond Kingdom. And what makes this even more tragic is that in the final stages of that war, her kingdom and family were held as hostages. But the strategists of the kingdom never told her this because they feared she wouldn't keep fighting if she found out her family and kingdom were under hostage. So, under no knowledge, she kept fighting, and she did win against the Diamond Kingdom, but she lost her family and kingdom through the process because they were hostages, and essentially the kingdom said, hey, do what you got to do. And they did what they had to do, and it all went down to the ground. So by the time Princia found out, it was already too late. They had won the war, but her family and kingdom were gone. She was furious and attacked the royals for hiding this information from her. And she was stripped of her title and had her magic sealed away, and then was left in prison in a village. And as much as you would think it doesn't get any worse than that, the village she was being imprisoned in happened to get attacked by bandits. And Princia was like, you know what? I'm going to just do what I want to do. And so she went out and she fought the bandits, even though her magic was sealed. This ending in her own death. So Princia ended up dying before, pretty much, in a way you could say Princia died by her own terms, but she died losing everything. She lost her family, she lost her friends, she lost her kingdom, she even lost her magic. and died. And that's the story of Princia. So that's the three. Now, if you don't want to hear Conrad's, then I suggest you click off, because Conrad's is the last one. The only reason why I say you don't want to hear Conrad's is because Conrad's is somewhat in the manga. I mean, Conrad's story is somewhat in the movie, so you technically will hear it. But for those who want to just hear what the volume said about it, let's do it. So Conrad was born into a noble family himself, but his magic, his key magic, was looked at as very like villainous and evil, and it was also not what he considered that powerful. So he's incredibly insecure and incredibly lonely. Ironically enough, though, he eventually started out figuring out how his power worked and became strong, and ended up joining the Magic Knight squad. This is also when he befriended Julius when he was still in the White Deer. He ended up falling in love with a woman named Lovila from the Forsaken Realm, and eventually made his way up to being a captain of a squad called the White Serpents, which I guess doesn't exist anymore because we don't know of it at any time in current day. There's no references to it. So I guess he just became his own captain squad. This is also probably important since he's a movie character. This is probably why they did that. Because if they tied him to any canon squad, then they would have to acknowledge him in canon. And I don't think they care enough to do that. But that's a whole other thing. So everything was going smooth. He was the captain of his own squad, and his wife or the love of his life, was his vice captain. Unfortunately, Roll set a trap for him too, and got his wife killed and a lot of his team. And Conrad did not take it well at all and really wanted to end the discrimination and anger and toxicity in the kingdom. So he did also achieve the title of Wizard King, but he never really achieved his dream the way he was trying to go about it, through incremental change. And his anger and pain got worse and worse and worse. And then he learned of the Imperial Sword and to say, you know what? I think I'm going to start a rebellion, because if he can't change the country incrementally, why not just do a hard reset on the country entirely? Which leads into the events of the movie. So essentially, he's another character who was cheated by the royals. Then he got disillusioned by not being able to change anything and said, you know what, fuck it. These people are screwed anyway. Let's just do a hard reset. And that's Conrad's backstory. So you can leave in the comments section below which backstory you think is the worst or the saddest. And please let me know. Thank you once again. Shout out to Night Baron for translating this on Twitter. You can follow, I think it's a she, but I'll say they, them, just in case. On Twitter to see more. They do a lot of Black Clover stuff, like for the chapters, the leaks, and also translations for volumes, especially some of the cooler stuff. So go support. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for the support. This has been your boy, the Insane Gang Vic. And if you do want me to cover the mini chapter, the Asta versus the Black Bulls chapter, let me know, and I'll probably look at that too as well. But thank you, and I will see you later. Peace. Oh, God, it's so sad.